Okay, so welcome to another typology interview. We have Brian. How's it going, buddy?
I can hear you. It's going good. I just had to turn off YouTube because I was hearing the echo.
Yeah, I was hearing that.
A little ST problem solving here. How challenges two ST saviors.
Right.
I'm doing well, man. Just have a kind of a hectic day today. It's unexpected, so I'm trying to go with the flow. I had to change a couple clients around, and I'm trying to hear back from one, and whether or not we're meeting tomorrow morning at 4 a.m. my time or not. So,
oh wow, yeah.
Got to get that all squared away. We'll see what works out.
So, people who don't know you, you were a project manager at NASA, something like that.
Something like that.
Something like that, and then you left to be a personal coach.
That's part of the story. Yeah, I didn't leave for that purpose, but that's
Right.
where I ended up becoming plugged into the world again.
So, and you studied engineering or something in school too?
Yeah, mechanical engineering probably wasn't what I should have gone into. That's part of my story. I could talk a little bit about that today. And the journey of getting to my typology and my identity has been rather stressful, not direct. I guess a lot of people probably share that to some extent, or maybe to a full extent. I'm not sure. But yeah, so mechanical engineering was my undergrad.
What motivated you to go into that specifically?
A mistake. A good mistake, though. My dad is part of my life story. Somewhat inexplicably, we one Sunday morning, our family went to church, and he got up real early every Sunday morning, like 4, and read the newspaper. I woke up about 6:37 and went sat with him. And my dad was a mailman and came, his dad died when he was 9. He came from really hard background. And we were struggling financially most of our upbringing, and he wanted better for me, I suppose. And he said, "Hey, son," he was reading about careers of the future, and he said, "Maybe you ought to be an engineer when you grow up." And I think it was my FI that basically said, "Okay, Dad." And I just felt like almost like a blood written contract to do that.
Yeah.
And never really gave anything else much consideration. I had things that I probably should have given consideration to. I know I should have given consideration to, but that's how it turned out.
Yeah, so you didn't actually look at what you would be good at or what you wanted to do. You just sort of were obligated to what your dad was saying. Yeah.
Yeah, my dad was a super, super dude. He passed away many years ago.
Right.
And he was the kind of guy that my mom was the disciplinarian. She probably was an ESTJ. And so mom was the hard hand in the house. Dad was soft. And I think he was a SIFI jumper, ISTJ.
Yeah.
And but anyway, he just, when he said something, you just didn't want to disappoint. So that was a big part of that. And it turns out, he didn't realize until much later in life that I took that literally, like it was a contract we signed. So anyway, long story short, I ended up in engineering, in petroleum engineering in Louisiana at the time. And actually was enjoying that. But for some reason, I got somebody talked to me and said, you need to diversify. And I've always had an inclination to that language. And so I changed to mechanical. I first changed to computer science. That was a nightmare. And then I changed to mechanical engineering because it was diversified. So I was in school for quite some time.
Wow.
And engineering was, not at all what I should have went into, but I made it work.
It was challenging.
Big time. I confess to folks, I kind of feel it was almost a miracle that I actually got that degree. And honestly speaking, I just wasn't fit for it really well. And I know now a whole lot more behind that is why that was the case.
But you still found yourself at NASA. Like they still put you in a position that was sort of suited towards you.
No.
No.
So I was hired by mistake, is what I would say. This really wonderful guy named Milton, Apollo era guy. He worked in the Rendezvous group. And I basically just showed up one day here in Houston, told everybody I had an interview because I wasn't having any job offers. Or actually, I had one at the Kennedy Space Center of all places and a few other places that I wasn't really interested in. So I showed up over here one day and he was impressed with me just showing up. And I had a 5-minute interview with him. And he looked at that in my resume and misconstrued things and came up with the idea that I could help them develop some software for this new tool that was needed to do some clearance and safety work. So I was falsely hired under the idea that I was a software developer because I had a mechanical engineering degree with an emphasis in CAD/CAM. So I took computer aided design, computer aided manufacturing, robotics, and classes like that as part of my curriculum. But it showed up too heavy on my resume, and they were looking for somebody apparently just like me. Well, they got me.
Yeah. Wow. And but then you found yourself afterwards at NASA they put you somewhere that was better for you?
Okay, so part of my story is my first 6 months, I hated it. Absolutely despised. I had a calendar on my desktop counting down the days because they had paid and put me up in a place for 36 days on per diem, $45 a day spending plus that expense. And I had been told by somebody, hey, you got to stay 6 months or else you're going to have to reimburse that money. And I didn't want to have to worry about that. So I had a calendar, actually. This is SI for you. I was counting down the days. Unbeknownst to me, they were deliberating whether they were going to keep me or not, because on their end of the equation, which I learned later as a supervisor, manager, and a leader, that if they kept me 6 months and a day, they had to keep me. It was going to be harder to get rid of me. Right. And so there was that 6 month delimiter. On one side of the equation was me leaving before I had to pay back. The other side, they had to keep me. And so they called me into the office like about 2 days before that milestone, when I was sweating it out, going off and say, hey, I really appreciate you guys giving me this chance, but I'm not doing great. I suck, and I don't fit here, and I'm going to go find me a job somewhere else that I fit. And but thankfully they saw that, and they said, well, we like you. You're a natural leader. You work hard. You're trying. People like you. You fit in the team. So we'd like to put you in this other discipline. And they did, but that wasn't a good fit either. But I made it a good fit.
It sounded like it was a good fit for you. From what we've talked about it in the past. And
yeah. Well, eventually, yes. But immediately, no, because it was calling on it. I was in a group with almost all aerospace engineers. They were all like living their dream. They were all like 3.9 GPA from some of the best schools in the world. Right. And then there was me, a Cajun from South Louisiana who barely got a mechanical engineering degree. And so I struggled mightily there to find. I had to work way harder than everybody else. But eventually I earned my credibility, and I started to distinguish myself. And for me, it was coordination, it was integration, and it was creativity, and it was designing techniques to fly in simulators. Yeah. And so I became really good at those things. And that's what kind of saved me and kept me in the saddle.
Yeah. But then at the end of the day, your FI wasn't on board?
Never. In fact, I'm a person of faith. It's part of my little spiel here. Is I had a joke going with God the whole quarter of a century I was there. Really, God? Is this where you want me? Because it never felt like it was a fit, because I was living everyone else's dream but mine. It's like that classic Kendrick Hughes statement, when you got your ladder up against the wrong wall. But I made it something that I liked. I loved the team environment. I loved the organization. I loved the culture. And I loved a lot of the people. And I eventually grew to situationally loving part of the work. And I just never have been able to quit anything. It's just not in my constitution. So I told myself, I'm going to stay 5 years, and then I'm going to leave. So I had another clock down gone here, T minus so many years or months. And when that happened, I had fell way behind everybody else in assignments, and I felt like a lackey. And I was distinguishing myself on stuff that actually turned out to be pretty important, but I didn't see it that way. And then what happened is Bill Clinton and said, "Hey, let's do something with the Russians." And so we got a call. Our directorate did. I remember it. I was happening right around the corner from the directorate office when it happened. And I was working a mission called STS-63, which was to deploy a satellite, go to a totally different inclination. And I was really doing a real good job on that. And we had to change the entire flight. And then all of a sudden I became a prime person working as a lead, interfacing with the Russian scientists and engineers to craft new ways to do business. So there's that innovation and creativity spark that came into the equation. I had become a really good pilot. My joke was I'm the best shuttle pilot that's ever lived in the world, but I've never done it in space, so I can't prove it.
Right,
Because
because you did all the simulations,
yeah, hundreds of simulations. I got really good at it and very creative, and I helped in my own way with a lot of other people revolutionize the way we do what the discipline, rendezvous and proximity operations was what they were called. So I distinguished myself. I kind of earned my wings. I was a flight controller. Oh, that was a nightmare too. I now know why. A part of it is that when you're on console, there's tons of data. There's quick decision making, and you're listening to probably anywhere from 5 to 15 different voice loops simultaneously. And it just completely taxed me and wore me out. I would do it because I over prepare and work my tail off. I would fool people into thinking I was actually good at it. But my joke is I felt like an introvert that had to go to weddings 5 weekends in a row. I was just completely exhausted after the simulations. They try to humble you. And I was completely exhausted after missions. And so I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. And so through a series of events, a lady that I had worked for, she saw me in the hall one day. Her name was Ernolia, wonderful woman. And she and I got along real well. I bet you she's an ESTJ, to be honest with you, in retrospect. And she said, my nickname's Bert. Said, Bert, have you seen I posted for a supervisor job for the Rendezvous Prox Ops group? I'm like, no. She said, you ought to apply. And then other people started seeing that app, and I applied for it. And so then I started to move into supervision and started to kind of like really feel, okay, now I have a home. I'm doing something that comes easy for me.
Yeah.
And, the TE was starting to really, I was using TE all along and many times, a lot of planning stuff, a lot of flight design stuff.
Yeah, you can't not. Yeah.
You can't not. But I really started to see, maybe I can be a good fit here. And so I did that, and there's a lot more to it. I don't know how much you want to hear, but I moved into supervision, management, line management.
So that's where you started finding you were suited to the role, sort of thing.
Yeah, right. And what I was able to do at that point was, instead of like feeling like I was completely inadequate and having to work 10 times harder than everybody else just to stay on par or to excel, because I did do some things that were really special. We all did, and part of a team and individually as well. But I felt like, okay, I could do this. I don't have to study, way excessively like I did in college. I don't have to feel inadequate. And it was integration, it was supervision, it was management, it was leadership, it was process leadership that I ended up doing the rest of my career. Then I was in the space program.
Yeah. So could you maybe categorize a little bit what, if like another ESTJ, so they don't fall into this kind of trap, what kind of job categorically was a better fit for you and less good for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I do my share of career coaching. I've coached a lot of people. As it turns out, INTPs and INFPs tend to be the people whose parents find me and say, hey, my son or daughter needs some help. So I haven't really coached many ESTJs, as it turns out. But if I did, there's a bunch of classic examples of ESTJ career paths that fit. If you're a leader type, there's 4 different types I've learned recently from talking to Dario. And, things that are more logistical, that's what I ended up arriving into, because I was a very
It's funny how you reinterpreted the question, though, because like I'm asking it for you specifically, and you're talking about ESTJs in general.
Oh, okay, guilty. Okay, fair. Misunderstood you. I guess I'm guilty.
No.
Well, okay. So what I'd like to have had available to me, which is my big motivation for helping people not to lean their ladder on the wrong career choice in my work. It's a big part of my inspiration. You tend to want to help others where you had pain points, and I had major pain
Right.
points.
There you go.
So I would steer others to doing a psychometric analysis, which I didn't know was an option there. I was well into my 20s, about 5 years or so into my space program career, when I even heard of what psychometrics were. I've got a bunch of frameworks. I can share one of them with you here. It's not proprietary, but it kind of is. When I'm coaching people, I develop this framework. Would not surprise you at all that I have a color-coded graphic. But I basically
Yeah, I
came
mean,
up with
after talking to you this long, I know you've got a whole bunch of frameworks for every little nuanced
it's ridiculous.
category. Yeah.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it's who I am. And
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
finally like comfortable with it. And I think I'm in my wheelhouse, so to speak. So there's something the Japanese culture have called ikigai. You may have heard of it before. The
Yeah.
listeners
You told me
probably
about
have.
it.
And it's the overlap of 4 areas. Well, way before that existed, and this has been a frustration of mine, and this is going to sound wrong, but I've always invented stuff only to find out it's already been invented years before, and
Yeah.
that happens to everybody, I imagine. But,
Yeah. Yeah.
I have my own story. So I had came up with 8 components, and 4 of them are what the Ikigai folks have. And so mine has 8. And so I ask questions. I don't have this with me, but in my mind, I recall these 8 areas. And I ask folks questions along these lines to help them to basically do psychometric and psychological assessments.
Right.
I would ask people, if they were in my shoes, to do those, do a Myers-Briggs, do an OPS, do whatever, do a strong interest inventory. That one I find particularly interesting. It was super valuable once I finally found it. To do something called the 16PF, to do something called the Berkman, to do an emotional intelligence assessment. Do these assessments, and essentially you would arrive at what I call your thing, which is the center point of this wheel. Because when you find your thing, then you become like all these wonderful people that I worked with in my space program career who were living their dream.
Right.
And then that's your motivation to get good at it, to stay in it, and to, basically have a life that feels like it's a home for you.
So you found a place there though that was a home for you, like that you were good at, but your FI still wasn't on board. So right? And that's kind of why you ended up leaving. So even though you can do all these assessments and figure out what you're actually good at and even get to the job that you're a perfect fit for, as an ESTJ, if your FI isn't on board, so then it doesn't matter, right?
Well, it doesn't. But as it turns out, part of my unfortunate journey is that I really didn't have an FI to speak of until after my father died, when I was in my 30s. And that's when I started doing a lot of different things that I'd never done before, because I started to feel like I had a license to live my life, but I still didn't know myself. I know myself extremely well now, but then it was still not that great. So in terms of my FI, it was more the part of my FI that was kind of unconsciously looking for a home, looking for a fit, looking for belonging, looking for associations in a path that I didn't have to struggle in. So it was more, again, coming at it from, I suck, I want to do something I'm good at, than it was, oh, here's something I really want to do. And then several people said, hey, Bert, you should go get an MBA. So I applied to MBA school several times. I didn't end up going. I was going to go to North Carolina. I was going to go to UT
So
at one point.
again, this is someone else telling you what you should do.
Yep.
Again,
Yep.
Was your
It was,
FI on board though, at least with this one, or?
Well, one guy, which I met with a few weeks ago, I actually made a post in the unofficial group about this guy. He's been like a mentor and an awesome person for me. He's like so different than me, but extremely similar at the same time. I was very perplexed. He was one of the people amongst others that said, hey, Bert, caught me in the hallway, so to speak. Have you ever thought about getting an MBA, or whatever? So that kind of gave me another pathway. And then I looked into it, and I took some psychometric tests at Rice for the first time. Actually, I had taken it before. And this lady named Jackie Hing said, hey, you're an ESTJ. I'm like, okay, great. And essentially, I'm paraphrasing it, of course, because this was many years ago. But something to the effect that life must be interesting for you, given what you're doing. And I'm like, okay, thank you, Miss Jackie. What do I do with that? And so I've learned over the years, and she said a lot more than that, but I don't want to bore you with the details. But essentially, she saw that things like branding and creativity and other things showed up pretty significant in my profile, and there were some things that didn't fit well. And she said, life must be kind of interesting for you. And I can remember those words very, very distinctively, even though this is in the 90s. And I'm like, what does she mean by that? She also said that
It's
what I
crazy,
now know
right?
to be
You
FI.
get the feedback from the tribe, and then you just lock onto that for how many years now? 25 years, 30 years?
Well, I found out, I thought my memory was horrendously bad. And I found out it's like world class. And it's really
Uh,
another hard thing for me to digest, because part of the reason why I thought academics was wrong, and this is part of my story I didn't talk about either. Sophomore, junior in high school, I had several head injuries. And after that, I can look back on it, and school went from being easy to being a nightmare for me, but nobody knew it but me, because I knew I had to get into college. I knew I had to do good in school, so I just did whatever I had to do to survive. So the reason why I bring that up is that, like I was just explaining to you, I thought one of the reasons why I thought I didn't have SI, because NTJs don't have SI. The other reason why I thought I didn't have SI is because SI is, in my mind, for right or wrong, associated with having memory,
oh,
right? I know
right,
now there's a lot more to it, but I didn't know that before.
right.
And so, but back to the point, after a little skipping here, um, my memory is exceptional for things across a timeline, that classical. If I lived through it,
Yeah.
it had some emotional component
Your
to it.
experience, yeah.
If I experienced it phenomenologically,
Right.
it's like
You just keep going
it's
over it and over
phenomenal.
again. You'll keep
Well, I do that. Yes,
yeah.
that's my sleep processing for sure. But my point is that it's almost impossible to forget certain things.
I mean, I feel like if I was to do what SIs are doing, I wouldn't forget either, because you're just hammering it into your pathways. The more you remember something, the more you remember it. Like the more you go over it, the more you remember it. And just
Mhm.
seeing SIs, how they go over the information over and over again in that way. Yeah,
I didn't do it consciously, but yes, that function was
exactly.
going on for sure.
Yeah.
And I can agree with you that happens.
And
SI, I call it the impression.
yeah, yeah. Well, because in the
And
end, you're not really remembering the experience. You're remembering your memory of the experience over a thousand times that you've been remembering it.
well, no, I remember them both. And this is another reason why I thought
Okay.
I didn't, have these functions. I don't know if it's masculine or if it's a combination of different features or what, but I remember the experience. I remember the details. If it's something that's reasonably in my interest wheelhouse, or that, you know, something stressful or something significant, the hippocampus is going to encode that and you're going to recall it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So what I
well,
was trying to point at is, all of our memories aren't the experience itself. We don't actually remember the experience. We just remember an impression of it, a memory of it.
mm,
And then going over that memory of it, we solidify that memory. It might have nothing to do with, we might be delusional and not actually remember the experience correctly. I'm
mm.
assuming if you're taking care with SI, that's the purpose of it, is to go over it. But like I see it often that the narrative ends up getting changed. The more you go over the story, you can end up changing the narrative, changing your perspective on it.
Uh,
No?
maybe I don't see myself, but I don't think that's the case. I lead I'm a member of three men's groups.
Okay.
Two of them, one tonight. Before I got on, I had to send out the reminder for the meeting tonight. The little TESI there, and the one group are the people that all the people in this group. It's on Zoom. They're scattered around the country. Were the people who were on the first row my first day at work when I started my first job out of college, and they will. I won't say marvel, but I'll get compliments on how my memory is really, really good for remembering, like, oh, that softball event, or we did this event, or this happened. And I'm not getting the feedback that my memory's corrupted if it is. I'm getting feedback that I
Yeah.
recall with
No, that's
amazing
not what I
people.
was saying. Yeah.
Okay.
That's yeah.
Okay, so clarify for me, please.
No, just that the way SI works, going over the memory over and over again, it will solidify the memory, but it can, I don't know if you specifically are doing this, because like the whole idea is to preserve it, is to go over it, and maybe like anytime you get gather a new I don't know if you resonate with this, but this is what I've been told. Anytime you gather a new concept,
Mm.
then you get that flash of, oh, now that event makes sense in my life, and that event makes sense in my life, and you'll just go through the sensory story all over again with this new concept in mind,
Mm.
and sort of figure out the timeline again, in it from a different perspective. You go through that process, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
This reminds me of type of pattern. I think I'm marrying NE and
right.
SI together.
And then it'll give you clarity over periods in your life. Like when you learned you were an ESTJ, so then you have to go back through your entire life and look through that lens again and seeing all of the SI all over again. And so you'll be remembering it differently this time because you're seeing it through a different lens. Something like
Oh,
that.
yeah. Oh, that's fair. What I'll be doing is I'll put it into context and recalling it with different meaning and
Right.
with different clarity and with different contributions to me understanding how the frog did I go wrong so many times? How did
That's a
I?
big one too. Yeah, I see that a
Oh
lot.
God.
Yeah.
And speaking of NE, I would say before I was 35, I'm way past that now, 20 plus years past that. Um, I can now see how intuition is a beast that needs to be managed. And on the other hand, though, I was talked out of by a dominant ISTJ culture. Some major, awesome stock market moves and other things where I didn't listen to my intuition. But my point is that any sees, and I imagine in I, and now I know I don't have it. I thought I did for years. That's part of my corrupt personality journey because I lens life thinking I'm an NI user for 25 plus years. So that'll screw you up. And I defined NI based upon false pretenses, and that took a while to figure out too, right?
Right, of course, yeah.
Um, so when I say I can see where I effed up and how I interpreted things and how I put two and two together and got five or six, yes, the things you're talking and referring to were part of that recollection and I guess reframing it and putting it in context where now I get it. Now I have an insight, a realization, a prompting that gives me some clarity that I've never had before.
Right. Yeah. Catherine's just asking quick, you're 4 though, right? You were typed a social 4?
No, I
You're
wasn't
2?
officially typed, but I crowdsourced it and as a two. And
Oh,
I
good.
also felt I was a two.
Good.
Yeah. And the reason why, some people thought one, some people thought two, some people thought four. Nobody said three.
Right.
Um, and I'm not a three. Um, but four friends first, okay, it's plausible, but there's some other things in the pathway that didn't make sense placement wise. Because I'm paying attention now to Daniel Torres. I think he's trying to do some clarification and some innovation on a 4 number code.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be doing some more thinking. But to answer your question, thanks for asking it, Catherine. I think I'm a two.
No, good. Yeah. Okay, so I know you struggled with accepting ESTJ, seeing the SI in yourself for a while, and you've come to a resolution on that now?
This is why I'm glad we're talking this week because this is the first
Right.
week in my entire life that I feel like I have a personality home, and I'm
Nice.
almost getting choked up.
Yeah.
Um, I've made so many interpretive errors. I absorbed wrong understandings. Um, and only by the blessing of OPS, I don't think they got me perfect, but they got me damn close.
Yeah.
And it allowed me to open up and see some personality and some mental cognition processes that I hadn't properly given thought to before. That combined with my imaginations and my attempts to try to understand this thing I was told I had for many, many years in I constructed it incorrectly. I know why I did it. I talked to Dario Nari about it this last Sunday night. He knows why I did it, and now I understand why I did it.
Mm-hmm.
And everything makes perfect sense now. But his EEG, the Personality Hacker podcast I listened to about the 4 types of ESTJs, and OPS are all married at the hip now. And only since Sunday night can I say that.
Yeah.
In fact, again, I wouldn't be myself without showing this. It's work in progress.
The proof. Yeah. Right.
But this is my attempt to now plot my home, so to speak, from a cognition perspective,
Right.
and to finally vent out these false perceptions that, through no fault of my own, I was given. Hey, 4 professional certified MBTI practitioners over 20 plus years told me you're ENTJ. Most of the people in the community who saw my video told me I was either STP or NTJ. So it's not just me. It's not just the people that did my MBTI. It's just now I know why myself and others had such a hard time seeing me. Now, there are some very talented people who saw me all along, but I was not. It took me 6 weeks to finally say, okay, I'm an ESTJ once I got my shave.
Yeah.
Then it's taken me since then, which is over a year, to shed the false perceptions and formulations my mind had constructed over 20 plus years.
Yeah.
And, part of me wants to beat myself up for that. The part of myself wants to give me some grace, because how could I not have done that?
Yeah. No. Yeah. And the other thing is, like, these are just categorical ways to see yourself.
They
No.
are, but you and I dabbled a little bit with categories and OI and all these different things. And I guess I'm a little bit more to the OI inclination than you. So my brain can't help but OI things.
Yeah.
It's a big part of the way I'm made by DNA, my parents, God, the universe, whatever. And it's meaningful to me. In fact, if I look back when I did, to circle back to your conversation about leaving, when I did that first psychometric series, and I was told I should consider going and getting an MBA, brand management came to mind. Well, branding's, about taking a whole bunch of stuff and pulling it into one crisp, clean OI trust agreement. I got a master's degree in brand and product management, thinking I might do that. And I still love that subject matter.
Yeah.
So my point is not to argue with you, to explain that my way of lensing it and processing it is a little different than yours. And to me,
I mean, I was also believing all this stuff was real for a long time until I started seeing the way our minds work, and our minds are trying to categorize things all the time. And there's a very big difference between reality and the categories our minds are forming.
mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. It's like, this is just the way our minds are categorizing type. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It's the wrong way to categorize it. But it's still always going to be a derivative of our brains, a derivative of the way we think.
And I 100% agree with that. I was just putting it in my own words
Yeah,
and perspectives. We're not going to be in violent agreement on that one.
sure.
And, honestly speaking, to your point and your perspective, I've had to confess along the way that I've always felt the word judgment is wrong, but it's not, because my mind always wants to classify things. It's what I did in my work.
Mm-hmm.
It's what I've done that's been very successful in my work. and it's how my mind wires and thinks and processes information.
Yeah.
At the same time, what I once did a little practice podcast during COVID, and I did an episode that talked about this. And my mother, who's, she's gone, my father's gone, but, they lasting impact words you can hear them saying in your head. And my mom, very faith oriented person, she had on her refrigerator, guard against a critical mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one day I went home to visit her. She wasn't doing well. She's cooking some really awesome Cajun food for me. And I looked at the refrigerator and I saw that, guard against a critical mind. And I got very convicted in that moment. This was like 2014, 15. And since then, I've been trying to be less OI-ish, less
Right.
classifying, less distilling, less brand oriented, less assessing and classifying. And then what the world calls judgment, I have a problem with. Okay, so here's why. In my coaching experience, one of the more prominent instructors I have, and I'm paraphrasing a bunch of an hour lecture into this. You are assessing things. And then we call it judgment, and they do in the Myers-Briggs, they do it in cognitive functions, right? We call it judgment. But to me, judgment is a totally different thing. Judgment to me is an assessment that then you assign implications to. Like a judge, I assess you're guilty, here's your sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Or a person, here's what you've done. That was good, I'll reward you. Implication. That was bad, I'll reward you commensurately.
Mm-hmm.
So just getting inside my mind frame, classification and OIing and the way I operate, I've been trying to think more like your philosophy, because my confession was I once coached a lady at a coaching clinic. We were coaching each other at lunch. Her husband was an executive in an engineering firm. And so I asked her, I won't say her name, what's going on when you get home in the evening? Because she was expressing that she was having some struggles. I'll try to make this short. The short of it is that he's an engineer, he's an executive, and he's making decisions all day long.
Mm-hmm.
When he came home, what kind of decisions he's making? Solving problems. Because that's what engineers do. We're wired to solve problems. And even though I didn't mean to go into engineering, I should have went into industrial engineering. I would have fit there much better. I still have that commonality.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure I'm not talking out of both sides of my mouth here. Basically, when he came home, she wanted him to sit and listen to her. She didn't want him to solve her problems. But then she recognized, after I asked her a couple of questions, which is all coaching is helping pull wisdom out of people, she started crying. So I said her name. I said, I'm sorry, I stirred something up here. What's up? She said, no, it's perfect. She says, I'm upset with my husband all the time because he's so damn critical and he's always jumping to solving problems. But when he gets home at the night, you ask me that question, what do I ask him to do? I ask him to solve problems. Can you fix this? We have to decide if we're going to this party this weekend. So she would be all day, I don't know what she did during the day besides, she had children and whatever. Maybe she was a stay-at-home mom. I didn't ask that. But so the point is, my conviction was, oh shit. Some people don't want you to solve their problems. They just want to be heard. I learned that in coaching training. I learned that through my practice of coaching, right? I know it now and I practice it well. But I still have to guard myself, because what do engineers do? We jump to problem solving. What are we bad at? We're bad at shutting our trap, especially if you're blast first, and listening, because some people only want to be heard. Right?
Yeah.
So categorization and OIing and the things we're talking about, I bring that up because I've now said, okay, how am I going to manage this feeling that I'm making judgments about people all the time? And that coaching instructor was brilliant to help me that, because now I say I don't judge people. I assess, and then I pause, and I challenge myself, and I try to get information to get the other side of the story. And then, if appropriate, I assign implications. So that's the risk of my life of over categorizing things,
Mm-hmm.
And your input and your philosophy is a good ingredient to help me to challenge myself to continue to assess, gather,
Yeah.
analyze, pause, and then assign an implication if it's appropriate.
Well, one of the big things I learned from NEs is that the categories that the NEs are doing aren't they don't believe that they're true and real most of the time. Like I don't want to share. I know this is a proprietary thing, but you have something about like a 3-ring circus that you were telling me about.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't actually believe that relationships are like a 3-ring circus. Like you don't actually believe that relationships are a circus. You're just using that categorization to sort of
Yeah, it's a
help you
metaphor.
process. Right.
Yeah, it's well, okay. My mind in Dario's conversation when we had a 2-hour conversation Sunday night, and it was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I could say for the first week in my entire freaking life, I have a chance to represent myself and to have a home. I'm an
Mm-hmm.
ESTJ harmonizing, and I have a lot of creativity
Yeah.
version of me too. I am far from, well, in my mind, I'm far from the normalizing and the dominant version, which are the prototypical ESTJs. Another little backstory on that, and then I'll get back to your circus question, because that's what I do. I skip and then I come back, like James Cameron said when he describes how he's playing stuff sometimes. Um, it's 50-50. My NE and SI are 50-50. I've been contending that. People saying you don't
Yeah.
understand it. It doesn't work that way. No, and people have very strong NE said, no, you're super SI. And okay, it all matters who you compare yourself to. But my point is, before I get back to your circus question is, NE and SI are fighting a never-ending battle in my head. It is every freaking moment of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taxing. And what ends up happening, though, to get back to the circus thing, is that's a product of a metaphor, an analogy, a classification methodology to help me to put some order to the freaking chaos in my head.
That's right.
Okay. My head is fucking extremely, excuse my French, chaotic.
That's right.
I feel like an INFP or an ENFP. People will look at me on the spectrum and say, no, that's very untrue. And I understand why. But now I have EEG. He did 14 assessments of me. There was no thinking, there was no trying other than doing the exercises, these diverse activities. And it's 52% intuition, 48% sensory. So, yes, I think what ends up happening, and call out to Lyndon, the tribe, she's one last year that I was struggling through this, who's also an ESTJ. She, more than anybody else, helped me to get to see why the SI wins the tiebreaker. Because when push comes to shove, all this crap's going on in my head. But SI's coming in like the high school principal, like the general in the Navy or the bad guy, so to speak, and saying, let's freaking put some order to this, dude.
Yeah.
Your mind is a chaos mind of hundreds of things. And so the circus, that was my attempt. It's actually a 3-ring circus because I thought it was a fun explanatory tool.
It
There's a
is. Yeah.
couple that I met when that was going on last year when I explained that to you and others. And I met this gal, NFP preferences for sure. Her husband's an ISTP. And in a matter of 10 minutes, I said, well, is he like this? Is he like this? And she looks at me. She's like, who are you? You never met my husband. I didn't tell you anything about him except for some of his hobbies. And you just nailed both of us. Okay.
Yeah.
I miss a lot. I'm a terrible typer, but I also
But
have
in the
my,
categories you've already defined and organized, then you can use those again. Yeah.
yes. And
Right.
so my point there is that I kind of did some relationship coaching for the first time. And so I'm like, well, how the hell am I going to do this? That's when I came up with the 3-ring circus.
Yeah. That's right.
And I will confess here in my own relationship here, lots of insight from the community and from the world and from all this investigation. My wife has almost no NE, and it's caused problems because I crave to have any conversation. So we're working on that. And my 3-ring circus classified things into 3+ categories. So the 3 main ones are kind of like the anchor posts of a circus. The analogy is if it's up, you've got a lot of oxygen and a lot of room to go underneath there and, live a life and to have oxygen to have a good relationship. If the poles are cut short, you're going to start to see some issues. And the big pole in the middle is conversation and communication.
Yeah.
If that goes well, then it tends to feed everything else. The second pole I had was values matching and vision. The third pole is male, female, yin yang, and all those facets. If
Passion
those
stuff.
three
Yeah.
things are there, you're off to the races and you can overcome a lot. But if 1, 2, or 3 of those are compromised, especially the middle one, it's going to manifest in every aspect of your entire life. And then there's a bunch of poles that hold up the tent around the perimeter for financing and in-law management and all those other practicalities, right? So it's so much more than 3. But anyway, so I hope I answered your question. My mind needs to explore everythingness. And then the SI bazooka, as I call it, comes in and says, all right, bro, enough. Put some order in what I end up doing to survive is build frameworks. And I've got hundreds of them.
That's right. Frameworks. Yep. Yeah. I was looking into so this is something else I'm doing. I'm looking into the dimensionality of the functions. And so one of the dimensions that popped out through math was an interesting one, but I used your conversations and the way you framework things as like a very big backbone of the way our functions are structuring things. Because like I can definitely see, so we're opposite quadra, right? And I can definitely see that you're structuring things differently with your functions than the way that I do with my functions. The way that, you're structuring information differently. Yeah.
Yeah, you showed me some of that, and unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to watch your cast on that. But yes, so here's the deal. And this is an example I've got over here. I give away books in the community. I've got several hundred. I wrote a children's book. The book's
nice.
called Stitchy. So let me just tell you what.
Can we get that on Amazon? where do you get it from?
I've given them away to coffee shops. I just want
okay.
I had a business. I sold a bunch of them, and I sold some children's clothing too. But for now, it's just a giveaway to the world. So I did this as an MBA project in a brand management class.
All right.
I developed this character. So what did I do? I interviewed over 200 moms, grandmas, aunts, and fathers. I looked at every classification of doing good possible. And the idea was, what's the ideal characteristics to launch a child into kindergarten to first grade? And I balled it down to 8.
Okay.
Then I balled it down to 2. Be good and be happy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's a perfect example. And then I wrote a children's book on it, rhyming, NESI type stuff.
Yeah, cool little pictures.
Yeah. Hired a graphic designer.
Yeah.
And it's a kid's book, and I give it away, and kids love it. And the idea is for parents, grandmas, whoever, to nurture their kids between 2 and 5 or 6 years old and launch them into the world with ideal principles, values, FI.
Yeah.
Right. So this is an ESTJ. This is TE. This is SI. This is NE, and this is FI.
Yeah.
And it's just what I did.
Yeah.
So like your thing with frameworks, I don't recall it all, but I've got this big binder. It's full of hundreds of frameworks. That's my first line. Then I've got the keeper, the one that covers, the main ones I use in my consulting and coaching.
Right.
And in the formation of a book that I'm writing. I'm a framework addict. And your way of your Venn diagram, systemization is a requirement for my brain. And collating and making things blast friendly is a requirement of my brain.
Yeah, those are the words I called for. Yeah, systemizing and frameworking is what your quadra is doing. Yeah.
So once again, I've got OPS, I've got Dario's assessment, which he clearly says, that's what you're doing.
Right.
And those two things are like humongous. I couldn't be here without those two. No way. No way. And I needed both. I couldn't just take OPS's word for it,
Right.
although they're the ones that opened up my mind to see the truth. But it still left too many lingering things that were anecdotal or trust me or, oh, my NI says this. And I'm like, yeah, screw you, man. I believe you and I appreciate you and I love you, but that's not good enough.
All right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Dario's EEG put the stamp of approval on it. And
Right.
that is how my mind worked, because objectivity and scientific inclinations are in my soul. And
See, the
now
thing with Dario's EEG stuff is not everyone is getting the same type in OPS. Like, you sort of lucked out, so you're good. Yeah.
right. And to be a little selfish, okay. I needed that.
You
And
needed that, yeah.
yeah, and my brain is it's freaking chaos, dude.
Yeah.
I've always been chaos. I don't know how much it is. I'll tell you real briefly because it's germane, I think. I talked to Dario about it. We're just exploring possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
A baseball bat to the prefrontal cortex in sophomore year in high school. This is a story I won't get into. A motorbike fall down, hit the back of my head, laid there, and I can remember just like it's happening right now on the gravel road. I can feel my heart beating in my back of my head. A football concussion. Coach Mike, asshole, he had me and Darren, this really tough kid, do this exercise. And this is way before I knew anything about prefrontal cortex or concussions or anything, but I had a concussion for sure. Spring of second semester junior year in high school. When I was an infant, I was quote unquote drop on my head. So anybody wants to make fun of me, there you go. I'll never know the details of it because it was my babysitter, and I don't think she or my parents knew what to do with that. I've had a lot.
You really think all these events affected the way your mind works, or was your mind always supposed to?
I know it does. And I will emphatically tell anybody that says otherwise to go jump in the freaking lake, because I was a good student until my senior year in high school. When I moved schools, by the way, 2 weeks before my senior in high school. So that was a trauma as well. And I went from a small school where everybody knew me and I could be shy to a big school where I knew no one. And I was there with people going to all kinds of schools around the country and the world. Very, very high-level people. My other school had high-level people too. It's just it was a totally different numbers game. And school became a nightmare for me in my senior year. And I can look back on it and attribute to the sophomore and junior year head injuries. And my organizational skills got weak. I couldn't organize things. I couldn't remember things. And it went all the way through college and into my first few years at JSC.
You think your brain healed after that? It got better?
Here's my theory, never to be totally proven, but anybody can contend it all they want. I will listen. My brain is an explosion of connections.
Yeah, I mean, that goes with your quadrant.
In the front. And I talked to Dario about this, and he was like, oh, yeah, that's true. But then you've got this feature and this feature and this feature, and you got F8, and it does both SI and FI. And you've got this. And I'm like, TE's distributed throughout my brain, I think. And I'm not going to put words in his mouth because, he may or may not endorse my characterization of this. But I believe that my brain developed through the school of need because I was hell-bent on becoming an engineer. There was zero chance I was bailing. Zero. Yeah. So I forced my brain to do shit that it just wasn't equipped to do. And I think neuroplasticity wired it more complicatedly.
Yeah. Do you think that, okay, this is a big trap. I shouldn't be asking this to an SI, but like asking you if something went differently in your past is just a big Pandora's box. But like if your dad didn't get you onto engineering, do you think your brain would have locked onto something else and then used that that as the excuse to go through school in the same way?
Okay, so what I'd have had going for me is I would have went to a high interest area, an FI. I would have went uh I would have went to an area that was more applicable to my skill sets, and I still would have had challenges. But I was asked this a few weeks ago. I asked a client this question, and sometimes brilliant clients ask you in return, at the end. It's really cool. And so I have this ready made. It's like, what would you be if you weren't an engineer? If you didn't work in the space program, which you should have never been in there. And that's a fact. I was not good enough to be there, but I made myself good enough to be there. I would have been a truck driver because I love traveling. I would have been a weather person because I'm obsessed with weather and climate. If they had it back then, I'd have been a travel blogger. I'd have been what Kendrick Yu did to a certain extent. I might have been a social psychologist or an anthropologist. I had a wonderful conversation with a husband and wife yesterday about their anthropology background, and it was just phenomenal. Those would have been my wheelhouse. Those would have been the things. And in fact, well, guess what I did from my 4 classes, my electives in engineering school? You know what they were? Humanities, criminology, sociology, and psychology.
Yeah.
I probably picked them because there were cute girls in the class, to be honest, and I thought they would be easy. But I also think subconsciously I was drawn to that, and I just didn't recognize it.
Could be. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do think that we should all have peace with our past in some degree, and not believe that it could have or should have gone differently. That because I don't know if you would be the same person. You know what I mean?
Maybe I shouldn't be. I'm far from perfect. I think we could.
But you wouldn't have been perfect anyways. You would have been far from perfect anyways.
A lattice of permutations out the wazoo of different realities.
Yeah.
That would all worked out, I believe.
Yeah.
What I've been having, I would have. Oh, just another thing I say to folks. We all have different lakes we fish from to tell our stories about our life. We tell them to ourselves. We tell them to others. Mine just happened to be I'm a Cajun. I've traveled the world, and I worked in the space program. Yeah. I've got some other lakes too. So that's what I talk about. Because why the frick not? I worked a quarter of a century.
That's right. Yeah, why not?
Yeah. I mean, what the hell else am I going to tell you a story about?
That's right.
And people don't like that sometimes. Well, that's just too freaking bad.
Yeah. Well, the reason why I'm saying is like if you don't find some kind of peace in your past, I'm not saying you didn't or whatever, but
I didn't have peace.
If you don't, then you can
to having peace for the first time with my past.
Yeah, you can keep letting it hold you back and saying, "Oh, you can blame it for your failure today," is what I'm saying. I'm not saying you're doing this, but I'm saying this is the trap of that is blaming your past for, okay, I should have been somewhere else. I should have been better. I should have been, and all of that type of thinking isn't going to help you because you are where you are. And, it should put a pass. I don't know. It shouldn't hold you back. It shouldn't stop you.
Okay. So here's for you. I've talked to Samuel a little bit about this and some other folks, my ABCs, right?
Right.
It's the perfect place for that. I can agree with what you just said 100%, but my body and my mind have to come along for the ride.
That's right.
And so here's the ABCs: awareness, a blueprint roadmap, and then commitment to create. ABCs. I use it all the time. I wrote a little pamphlet book on it. Just didn't publish it.
Yeah, I remember you talking about this before too.
Yeah. So here we are. So you just told me things that I 100% agree with.
Right.
But my body and brain and soul aren't completely along for the ride yet. So I need to get out of the awareness loop. And now I can get on the blueprint map and the commit and create with that disposition of all these curiosities that now I have a first time. I'm tired of people saying, "Oh, you just don't get it." Well, you don't get it either. Right. Mm-hmm. And now I get it. And that's the most important thing, is for each of us to learn and go through these experiences and get it, so that we can then start moving forward.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I have this image in my head. I was in marching band, and the band directors had this one maneuver I had to do one time. And and then you stop your foot down and start going forward. Before you do that, you were just in one place. You're in the awareness loop. And you have to be ready to stop your foot down like a military person almost, and then march forward into that blueprint and creation dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly speaking, until this week, I wasn't ready to do that. Just the truth.
Yeah.
So I believe, philosophically, awareness wise, check. But if you told me that 6 months ago, or even 2 or 3 weeks ago, I couldn't salute and go. To use another ESTJ military metaphor, analogy, or whatever the hell it is. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's totally fair. And then the other thing is, like, okay, the fact that you're sitting here today and saying, I get it, right? Like, that awareness, that depth of knowing, it's like whatever path, it doesn't matter what path you took, you are at this place now where you're getting it. I can't say, I don't know what the past would have been like different, whatever, in your life. Like, maybe you never would have gotten to this point where you finally got it, you know?
True. I think I would have, and I would have gotten there faster, but I'm
faster.
not sure.
Yeah, sure.
I might have. Okay, so what if 12 years ago, when I was encouraged to go get a PhD in cognitive science, cognitive and neuroscience and affective neuroscience?
Mm-hmm.
What if I had done that and work with this guy who is a psychometric expert?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'd have got there sooner. Maybe I wouldn't have.
But it's okay. You would have gotten to your life path. You would have gotten to happiness. You would have gotten to maybe a lot of other things that were better for you in your life. Maybe someone could have come along and been like, okay, what is your actual passion? And actually dug into your FI and actually helped you, find a career path that you would love and enjoy. Like, all that stuff is great, but then you would have been in unconscious land and just been happy and, and not gotten to the point where, okay, I get it. Like, that statement there, oh, I get it now, it is only through like brushing up against adversity.
Again, peace on that, because there's all kinds of permutations. My belief is that it would have all worked out. They would have all looked different. And I'm grateful for my hardships. And
Right.
I ask people in my travels, how'd you get to today? Well, I can answer that question, and I can be grateful for both the hard knocks and for the beautiful moments. I've had amazing experiences. It's like jokingly say, I lived the Forrest Gump life, because pinch me. Did I really do that?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I talk about it too much. I don't know. Some people would say so. But in the case, that's my lakes that I've lived and I've fished in. And that's my stories.
Yeah, that's right.
And my hardships are part of those stories as well. So, yeah, you're right. The smartest philosophical approach to say is I'm exactly where I need to be. But also to reflect and learn and to try to gain a more crystallized understanding of how you got where you're at, both by paths that you might have been highly problematic and ones that maybe were fluidly accessible to you. And everything.
Yeah, for me, that's a complete void. Like, I'm not doing that at all. That's not at all the way my cognition is working. I'm not looking at the past and how I got here and what if. And it's just like, okay, I'm here. Yeah. So I'm trying to think, like,
well, TISE, why would you?
I don't know. Maybe I'm running into problems where, having a concrete narrative would help me, and going over my past over and over again might help me. I don't know, in certain moments and things like that. And it's just not something I'm doing. And so that, like, I'm seeing the perils of it. I'm seeing like the like, okay, you can blame your past and let it hold you back. I'm seeing like a whole bunch of downsides of it, but then there's like a whole bunch of good sides to it as well. And yeah, just wondering, like, maybe that's a direction of growth for my functions, is to sort of delve into these narratives and going over which you were just explaining this whole video of just beautifully talking about your past. Contextualizing it, because you've been recontextualizing it forever, so now it's like it's been completely contextualized in every which way, upside down, left, right, and you could just give it over in in a blast.
Well, hopefully with some reasonable skill. One of the things Dario Nardi's, there's two real interesting areas that popped up, hotspots. One was not a surprise, although I didn't. I'm not saying I do this, but other people have said I did this. It's called precise speaker. So I guess that's a blast attribute. It's a hotspot in my brain. It's extremely utilized in all these diverse activities, and it's extremely connected to the rest of my brain. So I guess that's a blast verification anecdote. The other one is more interesting, and it's an area called F8. And if you read F8, it sounds like an FI DOM, right? It's, in fact, I've got it. I can maybe pull it up here and give you an excerpt. I don't have it written exactly because, again, it surprised you not, I have a one-pager on my analysis. So F8, grounded believer. No beliefs and values. Recall details with high accuracy. Seek environments where character and authenticity exist. So that's FISI. I'm blast last FISI. But one of the hottest spots in my brain is F8, which seems to call it SIFI.
Mm-hmm.
How do you make sense out of that shit?
Mm-hmm.
And it's another thing. It's like I think this is explaining to myself.
So another thing I'm trying to think about is like, okay, so the EEG is catching your brain now. It's not looking at it throughout history. It's not looking at it when you were 12. Right. So maybe that's somewhere that you're starting to focus on and pay attention to now a little bit more.
Well, good point, because since last July the 2nd, when I was told by several people, Habib and others, during the summer and the fall, that, it's going to be a journey for you because double masculine SIFI sleep last is a beast. Well, I've been attacking it. And maybe that's why it's a hotspot right now, because I've been on it.
Yeah.
And
the other thing is
he's
also tracking neural pathways, right? So he's tracking, so neural pathways are built over time. So it's not something that is just now you're using it and he's detecting it. It's also, the pathways have been constructed, like they're yeah.
Well, okay, so he's like OPS in that regard. He's going to have to longitudinally type people over years. It's going to take time before you can find out how much variability there is. It's like, okay, I got certified in something called Berkman. Okay, I chose it instead of Myers-Briggs, although I got certified in Myers-Briggs too. And it's a lot different than what a lot of people think it is, by the way. But in any case, the Berkman I chose because it was a system that had the highest reliability and validity. So people that have taken that over longitude, because it's been around longer, or it's been around a long time, it's this Houston-based organization. This guy, Roger Berkman, developed it, and it was based in large extent upon identifying your needs. So there we go, more of that. And it's really deep psychologically, and I think it's extremely well created. The usability of it could use some work, but the data's there. Well, it's one of the best, like the Big Five. It's repeatable, it's valid, it's reliable. If you test somebody over a period of time, you're going to get the same results. You and I both have science backgrounds. That's important to us. How do we know that if you assess you or me or anybody else over 30 years that you're going to get the same OPS code? How do you know you're going to get the same Dario EEG assessment? You don't. But you're going to get, like Dave says in the community, get most of the pieces right and move on and continue to grow. Because that's the golden nuggets that you can launch into your life and utilize.
So I honestly do think that we can cut people up in any way we want, make thousands of different possible typologies, and um, they can get to a reliability. Each one can get to a different reliability,
Hmm.
and the value in it doesn't come about until they've been around for long enough, where they've been tracking enough people and categorizing enough people to see sort of patterns within these categories. And so yeah, like even if we were to come out with the most accurate typology and best typology tomorrow, it wouldn't have any value yet, because it hasn't tracked the categories. It doesn't have the database. And so something like that you're talking about, that has years and years of tracking stuff, is going to be more valuable regardless of how valid it is, right?
It's well, it's why I chose that instrument
Right.
back, in 2016. Because I looked at all the instruments, I talked to the psychometric experts. I said, "What's the good things?" "Oh, you happen to be in Houston. Well, that's the best one." Usability, I'm working on it. Like I said, there's a lot of golden nuggets in it, but in terms of its validity, its repeatability, and all that stuff, it's the proof's in the pudding with that guy. And I'm going to test that actually, because I'm going to actually start re-administering it. And part of that, I'm going to ask somebody to assess me so I can see how they administer the assessment, so that I can be in a better position to maybe use some of their methods to do it to others. So I've got it done for me from years ago. It was actually part of what I used to determine to go into coaching, because that was one of the top things that it suggested. And I'm going to take it again and see if it's as longitudinally, if it holds up.
Cool.
Yeah. So I'm going to do a little
Well,
science there.
well, Brian, this has been a good talk. We're way over time, but let's just like say some stuff here, some good compliments here. You've got a lovely energy, apparently. Someone's laughing at your Kim, your diagrams. Yeah.
Thanks, Kim.
And
Kim's awesome.
someone's just saying hi, Asma. And anyways, thank you for sharing everything and for giving us a little window into the way you think. Hopefully we can all learn from it. And yeah, been good knowing
Well,
you over the years.
well, I appreciate it. Yeah. And thanks for giving this opportunity. I'm really a big
Yeah.
fan of your work. The one thing that I'd say about the lovely energy, there'd be some people that would disagree with that. And you know what? That's another part of the FI journey is, there are people that tell you, be yourself, and the same people will slam you.
Right.
And whether it's
For doing
lovely
just that.
energy or whatever, I think FI is about trying to find your authentic place and to represent yourself. Sometimes it might come across a little bit more elegantly than I have today, but that's
No, yeah, it was good. So you said you don't want to advertise for your coaching business. This is just
nah.
no.
I don't. I have a policy, ethical policy.
Right.
The International Coach Federation ethics are very staunch, and I comply with them. And I don't coach anybody in certain communities because I don't want to get into any conflict of interest.
Right. Okay. Perfect. So don't reach out to Coach B for coaching.
That's right. That's right. Well,
Okay.
I will be more likely to help people through conversation, and I've done that
Right.
dozens of times to people in the community and others, but not as a paid professional.
All right. Perfect. All right. Well, thanks again, Brian. Stick around for a second.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Bye, everybody.